Hey folks, welcome to the Broken Meeple. I'm Luke Hector, and this is the Tap 100. This is something I do every year now. Whenever it's the anniversary of the Broken Meeple, we're now on to 5 years here. I go through my top 100 games of all time. My personal favourites from my collection that I love to get to the table no matter what. And like I say, high or low, still love all the games. So don't think that just because one is at 3, one's at 93, that I hate 93. You know, I love all these games, but there's only room for 100. We've already done my 100 to 91, this is the second episode, and getting into these particular games, let's see, give you a few stats here. We have got 5 new debuts, whopping 5 new debuts. Out of 24 new debuts, we've got 5 here. We also have one of the 2 games that has returned to the list, since previously been on it, fallen off, and now come back. We'll find out more about that later, and the rest of them have mostly... they've mostly dropped. Yeah, they've mostly dropped. There's only so much that can be done with these. But, like I said, they're still all great games. So, let's get a move on with number 90. The number 90 is pretty much only dropped 3 places. It's remaining quite steady at this level. Tellest from Bezier Games has done a couple of games that I like. This one is more about... He's more known for his kind of city building or castle building style games. This one is one that I like for his castle building motif. You are building a castle with the expansion, you can put a moat around it as well, but you are placing these tiles in such a way that you are connecting up this big castle in order to score points by connecting certain types of rooms together, you know, having big rooms, small rooms, different shaped rooms. It's all done under this kind of master builder system where you price up all these tiles and then you have to rely on the other players to pay you the money to take those tiles. But do you make them too expensive so that they don't want them? Or do you make them so cheap that it's like, oh yeah, somebody's going to take it, they'll give me money. But then you want the tile as well. So I want this tile. I'll make it cheap, but oh, they might nick it. I might need to put it more expensive. Great amount of thinking in this game. And even though it's got too weird of a long title, the Castles of Mad King Ludwig, wherever you want to pronounce it. This is a solid Euro. It's a bit of a table hog, but I enjoy that master builder aspect. It's like, oh god, where do I price it? Oh god, it's an agonizing choice. But the main kick I get out of this is you get to build a castle. You get to put all the tiles together and have like dungeon rooms and, you know, the activity rooms, the gardens, the bedrooms, the kitchens, and as you put them together, they've all got requirements like scores this many points if you have, say, a bedroom next to the living room, or minus points if you put the activity room next to the bedroom and stuff like that. And everybody comes up with a nice, unique looking castle. It's fairly simple, but there's a nice amount of money management involved, and at the end of the day, you get to build a castle. And with the moat expansion, I forget what it's called, but I think it was called Secrets, and you build a moat around the castle as well. So not only do you have the complexity of trying to build the rooms in such a way, you now have restricted walls around it. So it adds to the challenge. Great game. Still love it. It's dropped a bit. You know, not that much though. We're what, 3 places? Give me a break. It used to be a bit higher up the list though. And now it's kind of hovering around this area. It's like, I still enjoy it. Just wish it wasn't so much of a table hog to get to the table. And with the wrong player, AP can really set in with that whole master builder thing, so I have to be quite selective about who I play this with. But still really enjoy it. Kicking off, number 90 on this segment. My number 89 is a new debut, the first of the 5 new debuts. This one I prefer to play 2-player or 3-player max, because it is fairly multiplayer solitaire. And there is a solo mode. I have not tried it yet, but I'm thinking maybe for a future video, if I start doing playthroughs, I might actually try and kick it out. But this one is a really interesting Euro puzzle game where you are controlling a selection of divers with different abilities, and you've got to send them down to get various artifacts, or cubes in this case. It is pretty dry. But as you send them down, others have to come up, and they have to come up for air every so often. And it's a interesting little puzzle about how you're going to use these divers, how long can they stay down there, how are you going to shift the various positions because they've got to be on the right level to get the right cubes and that. It's just a nice little puzzle, but it is a bit multiplayer solitaire, which is why it's only debuting at about 89. But Otis is fairly underrated. It's nicely produced, it looks decent on the table, and the puzzle is a nice cool aspect. It's like, I need that diver to be there, but I need to use these two divers first. What can I get them to do? Maybe if I build some propellers, I might be able to send that diver down ahead and then put them back up. And it's just like constantly juggling around these 8 divers whilst getting these tiles for special bonuses and trying to build yourself like a decent running engine. But it's not complex at all. I mean, the diver abilities are pretty straightforward to get used to. Everybody's got the same divers, so there's no sort of asymmetrical nature here. And you can go along different paths. You know, are some of you hunting like particular contracts? Are some of you more concerned with a type of colour? Are some of you going mad on hacking so that you can keep your divers down there for longer, or you know, or like for less time? Or are you going mad on the propellers so that you can do loads of shenanigans with the divers? It's just a nice, fairly sort of light to medium Euro game, a Euro puzzle. And normally this sort of thing would be like, multiplayer solitaire and pretty dry. I'm not sure I'm a desperate fan here. But the puzzle is that engaging. With 2 or 3 players, this one doesn't take too long, everybody gets into it, and you're usually not in the case where you've got too much downtime because you're always thinking about that puzzle. You have to plan ahead. You can't just do the next turn. You've got to think, I'm going to use him to get down there, and then once I've done that, he can go there, and then he can go there, and we can do this. You know, you plan ahead with some tactical adaptability for what tiles and bonus tiles come up. It's a nice little simple game, and I want to try the solo variant in this because I hear it's pretty good. It's an official variant. They just printed it later after the game, but I just haven't had the time to get it to the table. So maybe this weekend I'll try, but failing that, I'll try to do it soon. And if I want to start doing solo playthrough videos, I might try and do that as well. We'll see. It's all about time and money at the end of the day. So Otis, first new debut of this list, 89. My number 88 is the biggest drop on this whole list. I mean, not counting anything that might have dropped off the list entirely, but for one that was on the list and has dropped, this has dropped a whopping 68 places. And that is not to say that I think the game is bad. Mainly, it's just not hit the table very much lately because it's difficult, as I really want to play this 8-player. It's like the only count I want to play it at. I want to be able to use everything in the game fully, and for that I need 8 players. And I have had 1 or 2 games lately where people have taken it a little bit too far and gone down the crude route. And I'm not a big fan of those sort of party games where it's all about crude humour. You know, that's in all this really sort of gross out humour. I prefer either the controversial stuff or just clever humour. And with this one, you know, I can get a lot of that, but it just depends on what group I'm playing with. But even though it has dropped a lot, I still think Tellest Ration is a fantastic party game. This used to be 20. I used to absolutely adore this. I wanted to play it all the time. And I still love playing it. But 8 players, kind of hard. With odd players, it's kind of weird. And you have these flip charts that you're drawing on. And if you have less players, you don't see as many drawings. So I always want to play this with 8. And that's a hard number to get willing to play a party game. So it has dropped a bit for that reason. But with Tellest Ration, I can't draw for toffee. My drawing sucks. My art skills suck. Doesn't matter when I play this game, because you play something like Pictionary and you can't draw, poof, you know, the game just slaps you around, you lose, and you feel bad about yourself. Here, though, it is Chinese whispers with drawing. You get the clue word, you draw what it is on the flip chart, pass it to your neighbour, they guess what it is, pass it to their neighbour, they draw whatever that next guess was, and so on until it gets back round to you, and you just laugh your head off at how stupid the tangent was that people went on when they took your clue of shampoo and suddenly ended up at rhinoceros. You know, something completely weird. And the worse you draw, the more fun it is. Because you just look at these drawings and everyone's having a laugh and just having a good time. Because you're not playing for points. I mean, they have got a point rule system in here, but frankly, if you're playing this game for points, what's wrong with you? You know, Tellest Ration is just straight up an activity rather than a game, but it's an hilarious activity. I just prefer it not to go down the stupidly crude route. But again, I can bring this out with 6 every now and again, but I really prefer 8. It's just hard to find that direct player count of 8. But I've had it go down well whenever I've shown it to people, you know, and it doesn't matter if you can't draw, because I can't draw, and I love this game. So there's a testament right there. Number 88, Tellest Ration. My 87 is another new debut to the list. In fact, the next 3 games are new debuts, And with this one, this was the... Remember in my first video I mentioned I had to give the list a bit of a tweak to allow some recent games in? Yeah, this is the poster child for the one that I had to tweak it the most for, because I played it enough times, I got a review of it out, and I thought, this is a solid game. This will make my top 100, and it just feels bad that I'd have to cut it off the list this year only for it to possibly fall off next year and never get heard of. And I feel this one needs to have a little bit more buzz. This one involves you being on, a place around the North Sea and you're sheep farming. You're building up a farm of sheep, you're getting different buildings that give you like extra abilities, and you're storing sheep. You're breeding them as well. But on top of that, you have this semi-co-op aspect that you must build the dike because the North Sea flooded like crazy. And all the players are working to build up this dike so that it doesn't flood and potentially wipe out half their farm by the time the game ends. But whoever's doing it best can potentially earn money during the game, which is essentially victory points. But then, people in the middle might not gain as much, and the person at the back might be making it up by having a really good sheep farm and hoping that the other players get the dike built. So you can't ignore it entirely, but you certainly are trying to think, oh, I don't know, do I want to build it, or do I want to contribute, or am I going to hope that the other players aren't going to screw me over on this one? It's a neat game, and completely out of the blue, Lowlands. I honestly was uncertain about this one. Z-Man puts out a lot of games. In fact, I believe they are my second favourite publisher on this list. Yes, they've got 6 games on this list, and this is one of them. And with this one, I thought, it's designed by 2 different people, but developed in conjunction with Uri Rosenberg, so it feels like one of his games. But there's enough differences that it stands out way apart from his other stuff, like Feast for Odin and Agricola and all that lot. You have that familiar sort of, yay, I'm building a farm, I'm putting the fences, a bit like Agricola, all creatures great and small, but then the aspect of the dike's really interesting. Now, you don't want to play this with 2 players. It kind of sucks at 2 players, because you have a neutral market for cooperating with the dike, and you just lose some of that interactivity with other players. But you play this with 3 or 4, it just sings, because most Euros don't have a lot of player interaction. And here, your worker placement's on your own board, so you don't block each other off. But you're constantly like, you're going to help build this dike, you're miles up that track, don't let him, don't help him build the dike, but then don't let it flood either. And after you've built some of the dike, you have to ask another player to assist. You cannot back out of it. Who you choose, though, is up to you. Do you choose the one who can blatantly help, or do you choose the one who's like, you know what, you got no cards, there's no way you can help, but that's good for me. And by the end of the game, you might be in a position where you want to decide whether you want that dike to hold or not, based on what the other players have got. I actually feel a bit bad, because in my first game, I contributed a lot to the dike, and I was just overpowering the enemies, the other players on it, and it got to a point where I'm like, okay, fair enough, I'm going to cause the sheep holocaust of 2018, because I've already got a decent farm, I've got no breach tokens, I'm not going to lose any extra sheep or points for this, but you guys, you haven't been contributing to this dike, you're going to suffer, so whee, flush them away. It sounds a little bit mean and a bit dark, but, it's cool that it gives you that kind of opportunity. The choices in there are good, you've got a good selection of buildings, you'll want an expansion eventually to give you more buildings, but it's not complex. This is on the lighter end, I would say, of a lot of these styles of farming type games. I mean, it's not light, it's still medium weight, but there's only so many rules to teach, you've only got so many different actions, and the rules are pretty intuitive once you get used to the iconography. So, I made a... Yeah, sorry if you hear a bit of noise out there, but I made room for this on the list, and I'm glad I did. I didn't want this to fall into the darkness ether or something and be forgotten about, especially when I've done this. I did a review of this recently, I gave it a positive review, and I think everybody should check it out if you are a fan of farming style games, resource management, Uri Rosenberg style games, or if you're looking for a Euro that just has that little bit extra player interactivity that you haven't seen before. Lowlands. New debut at, what are we on now? 87. My number 86 is another new one to the list. This is done by Blue Orange Games, and I think this is the only Blue Orange game I have on the entire list. This one, though, is actually picking up some awards. So, in the Dice Tower Awards, we gave it, I think, the Best Production Award. I think that was what it was. But I have to say, I mean, this is one of the most nicely produced games, using no miniatures whatsoever in the last year or so. It looks gorgeous. It's just cardboard. It's just cardboard bits stuck together, but it creates this vibrant, cool abstract game that's good with 2, 3 or 4 players, and it just sings. The rules are simple, but it really makes you think. There's a lot of tactics in this as well as strategy. The theme, as much as it's an abstract game, is still pretty well done in how this works with the sun going round and your trees growing. Yeah, if you haven't guessed by now, it is this whopping great big box here. Photosynthesis. New to the list for 80, where are we on? 86. This is the only game from Blue Orange that I have. You know, I haven't got into their other games as much, but this one was just perfect. I mean, you know, an abstract game. I enjoy abstract games that have a little bit of theme. I know a decent setting. This is one that's not been done before. How many games do you know that are about growing trees, you know, proper growing trees? There's not many of them, but it looks beautiful. I mean, look at this artwork. The artwork on the front is gorgeous enough, but then on the back, and I mean, you'll see other pictures, but the trees in here, they're just cardboard bits. It's just literally 2 bits of cardboard stuck together, and lots of them in different heights and different colours. And it's an Instagrammer's wet dream. It just like looks so beautiful. It is wonderfully produced. You know, and the price point's not that high. You can get this for about, what, is it 30, 35 or something like that? It's not an expensive game for what it is. Mainly because it's all made of cardboard. There's no miniatures to jump the price up to stupid levels. There's no really expensive custom dice or anything. It's just, here's a bunch of trees that have been given decent paint job. You can make a game look beautiful with just a good lick of paint. You do not need miniatures to do it. But with photosynthesis, nice and simple rules, abstract game where you're building a forest up and you want your trees to have the sunlight so that you can get more light points in order to grow more trees. Eventually they'll get to the end of their life cycle, you'll cut them down and they'll give you victory points. But it's this sun mechanic that revolves around the board and you can see where the sun's going to go at various angles. And you know that a taller tree will block your smaller tree, it shadows over it. So there's a lot of getting in each other's faces as you're putting up a big tree that's blocking half of theirs. You can see ahead of time, I'm going to get a lot of light here and here, but there's a dark patch over there. Do I try to get more trees there, or do I just accept that's a dark patch and build up some light points for then? You know, there's cool tactics in this game. Yeah, there's an ounce of strategy as well. You know, you're trying to think, right, I'm going to build up around the outside, or I'm going to do this, but mostly it's tactical because the board state changes rapidly as the game progresses, and you've got to think, well, I could slip in there now because that tree's no longer there, but oh, he's just built that. Now I need to either grow this tree or get some more little ones on the board, and it just makes you think. But nice and simple. And did I mention it's beautiful as all get out? One of the most beautiful games ever. Photosynthesis deserves to be on this list. My number 85 is a game I didn't think I was going to like as much as I did. I mean, this is a theme I don't really go for. F1? Formula 1? Really? It's like, as racing goes, it's one of the most boring style of races I can think of. You know, you sort of sit there and just sit there in the stand, and occasionally a car will just go. That was fun. You know, what should we do next? Have a chat? It's like, come on, there's much better racing. But this one is an F1 game that is like 30 minutes tops. You've got a little bit of betting involved. There's a lot of blocking. You know, everybody's like, "Oh, get out of my way!" Oh, you know, shouting at each other. But the rules are dirt simple. It's perfect gateway level. Does up to 6 players. Yeah, that nightmare 5 and 6 player limit. And it's, you know, the first. I think it's the first game or second or whatever. But it's like the first like poster child for restoration games. They have been doing this whole thing where they get these old games, give them a new lick of paint, and spruce them up a bit, streamline them and whatever. This is my personal favourite of their range. Downforce. Downforce is pretty much perfect in terms of streamlined design. It's so simple. You just have a bunch of cards with the colours and the numbers on them that tells you what cars move at how many spaces. And you move all the cars. You know, so you decide, you know, you got to do it in order, but when you're moving them, you could move the others into less advantageous positions, whereas you help your own. You use these cards to bid for your colour card at the start, which has a player power that is different from everyone else's. How much you bid is up to you, but it's subtracted from your end scoring total. And as the game progresses, you know, you get a chance to bet on who you think is going to win. It could be your card, it could be someone else's. You get 3 chances with diminishing odds, and of course there's money for you yourself winning. At the end of the game, you add up all your bet winnings, you add up your personal position winnings, and you deduct how much you paid for the car. You know, you might have done really well, but then spent so much on the car that somebody who spent less and still did reasonably well overtakes you. You can get some really close scores in this. But being so simple, it's perfect gateway level, looks good, you've got little plastic cars and a nice, not the prettiest board in the world, but it's stark, it's clear, everything makes sense, you know, there's no ambiguity. You've got 2 different tracks to pick from, and ignore the ice cream man. And there's an expansion coming out of this soon where you get even more tracks, more player powers, including one track which has you doing figure of 8s. So you could go around the figure of 8 and then someone blocks you on the way back. I cannot wait for that map. I want the expansion for this so bad. But, you know, F1, not my favourite theme in the world. Definitely not. There's better racing I can think of out there. But it's just so simple, so streamlined, looks great, does up to 6 players, takes 30 to 45 minutes tops, easy to teach, fun to play. It's just solid. Downforce. My number, 85. Another new debut. And number 84 has dropped 12 places, so it's still remaining pretty strong. And it's published by Days of Wonder, who I've got to admit, they're tied with Libellud, who did Dixit, you know, 4 games there. And you could possibly argue that maybe there's 1 or 2 other games of theirs on the list, because technically Colosseum was Days of Wonder before it was Taste New Minstrel. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. As for the designer of this game, this is my favourite designer, Mr. Bruno Cathala. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've got a lot of you know, people think I just go after the same type of game. Not really. When I look through all my designers, they're very close scores. You go 6, 5, 4, 4, 3, 3, 3, 3, 2, 2, 2. You know, I like a lot of wide range of designers. There are just some designers that I don't like at all. But more on that later. But Bruno Cathala does a lot of games that I love. I don't know, there's just something about his style, they're just fun. And this is one of Days of Wonder's earliest co-op games. Okay, that ice cream man's getting annoying now. Where it's just solidly made, and it can take up to 7 players, I think 8 with the expansion, and it looks grandiose on the table, it's got all the artwork and everything, but it's not a complex game at all. Most of it's just done with poker hands. And this was one of the first few games that, not the first, but one of the first really good ones, that introduced the traitor mechanic. It is still popular to this day. I still really like it. Shadows of a Camelot. Yeah, it's other way around. It's straight up poker hands for most of it, but that aspect of, you know, you're working together with the other players, it's so simple, gateway level, you know, I could teach this to anybody, because I can just say, this is what you do on your turn, this is how we're all working together, but everyone's going to help each other. And with the cards, most of them is just making poker hands. Make 3 of a kind, make a full house, do a running straight. People understand that, it's not difficult. And a lot of people have heard of this sort of medieval King Arthur theme with the Holy Grail and everything, so it's a theme that sings to people. The traitor mechanic's great because you can play where there's no traitor, or there might be a traitor, or there definitely is one. Personally, I don't think you should ever play this game fully co-op, I just think, nah. But I'm not necessarily a fan of having there must be a traitor. I like it, I'll play it that way, but I much prefer the middle of the road one, which is, there might be a traitor. You don't know, you could get lucky, but there might be. And that one just ups the tension as you're constantly looking at each other, sort of, I know you're being nice, but you're the traitor, you're always the traitor. And this is one of the first few games that did it so well. The expansion, I think it's Merlin's Company, it's good for getting extra knights with extra player powers, but you can skip that expansion if you like, because it adds a lot of extra difficulty to the game. It's not like the game was that easy to begin with, particularly if you've got a good traitor on your marks. But it looks gorgeous, and I love the fact that every time I play this game, it is physically impossible to have this on the table for more than 5 minutes without someone giving a Monty Python and the Holy Grail joke. I love that film. It is one of my favourite comedies of all time. If I'm not quoting it, someone else is. There's so many Monty Python gags that come out of this, and it just adds to the experience. Especially if you follow the weird little variant rule in this, where you're not allowed to tell each other what numbers on the cards you have. You can't say, I've got 2 5s. No, you've got to think of something else to say. It's a weird rule, and you don't really need to do it, and some people just don't care, but I like to enforce it, because I just think it's funny to say, like, you know, I've got some champions here, they'll do you well. I got a couple of peasants, you know, if you want some, you know, and then you go to Excalibur and you feel like you're chucking peasants in the lake in order to get Excalibur. It's kind of weird, but I just love the fact that everyone's got their own code for how they describe the cards. Like I say, works with non-gamers, works with gamers too. I don't see it being played as often anymore, and I think that's a shame, because I think this one needs to continue to have the love. So Shadows over Camelot, number 84. My number 83 has returned to the list. Yes, this is the first of the 2 returning games to the list. And it wasn't that far below 100 last time. But I've managed to get it to the table a bit more lately. You know, my girlfriend enjoyed it. And I've sort of understood it a bit more and just thought, yeah, you know what? This is actually a really cool deck building game and unique. There is a sequel to this that I've recently just received on Kickstarter, which I'm playing through at the moment. Haven't had enough plays of it to warrant going on this list. And I'm starting to enjoy that one a bit better than this one, but that's not to say I don't think this game is solid as well. This is Tim Fowers' Paperback. This is a deck builder mixed with Scrabble, and normally that should make you run a mile. Seriously, Scrabble as a deck builder. Why do I want to play this? Works better than you think, because, well, for starters, I'm not very good at coming up with words. I can spell okay, but when you're trying to look at a bunch of jumbled letters and I'm trying to think of a word, I tend to freeze. I'm not great at that. You know, I'm not dyslexic or anything, I just seem to struggle making big words. But with this, you don't have to necessarily be that good at spelling. Because it doesn't really matter too much if your word is long or short. I mean, yeah, you get more currency for the longer words, but if you're good at deck building, each of the letters that you're buying has special abilities. You know, draw more cards, double this, double that, you know, get more money, trash cards. And if you're good at deck building, then you can get by this game by just resorting to that. You know, there are people I've played this with who barely played a deck builder in their lives. So they go around and they just simply, you know, they spell the words, they're really good with their English. But then I've played with players who can barely spell, and I just say, get used to the deck building and you'll do fine. It's a solid little game, you know, comes in a small box, although I have to admit, I'm not the biggest fan of this sort of like box of the lid that sticks out further than the other bit, and you have to be careful how you store the cards in there, but it does make it a bit more portable. And, you know, the sequel, Hardback, I'm enjoying slightly more, but I still think this one is solid, you know, for a small, inexpensive card game that teaches you how to spell better, but introduces a nice little gamer mechanic to teach people how to deck build. Because this is one of the games I would suggest if you want to get people into deck building. Yeah, you've got Dominion and stuff, which works just as well, but people know how to spell. People know about Scrabble. So you don't have to worry about them trying to absorb the complexities of Scrabble in their head. And the deck building, this is simple. Spell the word, get so much money, and there you go. So really doesn't take too long at all to get people into this, and it nice light teach for deck building. So it's solid, it has returned to the list. Will it be on next year's list? Probably doubtful, especially as I'm starting to enjoy Hardback more. But I feel glad that it has returned to the list because it is a solid deck builder that you should give a try, especially if you like word games. Paperback. Okay, 2 more to go. My 82 has climbed 10 places. This has actually climbed up the list the more that expansions have been released for it. It's difficult for me to get to the table, which is why it can't go much higher. Because a lot of people aren't as big a fans of this game as I am. I really enjoy this one. You just get this faction, shuffle them together, there's your deck, go play cards, area control, get in each other's faces. Nice and quick. The amount of expansions I have for this game is ridiculous. And if you haven't already guessed it by now, then it's a shame, because you really should hopefully know about this game. And just trying to get it off the shelf is actually hurting me at this point. Oh god, here we go. Smash Up. I really like Smash Up. Smash Up is just simply take 2 faction decks, shuffle them together, and there you go. And you can have everything from, I mean, the basic one gave you ninjas and pirates and aliens. Now you can have cute kittens and princesses and werewolves and bear cavalry and, you know, spies and geeky stars and basketball players. I don't know, I've lost count. Killer plants. There's so much in this game now, it is unreal. So much so that this is the big geeky box. They're actually planning to release a bigger, geekier box because of all the expansions they're bringing out. I mean, we're getting to the point where this is getting to that point where it's almost full, but there's still plenty of space in there. And they're doing a bigger box. This franchise just will not die. And to be fair, I don't necessarily want it to die, but if they said, right, we're not making any more Smash Up expansions now, we are done and dusted, I think I'm pretty good, considering this is a heavy box full of cards already. But I wonder if, actually I don't want to take the lid off because there's rule books in there and it's hard to store them all and that, but you know, the box is decent. It could have used a bit more extra space for the rule books, but it's a nitpick. But yeah, I like it. I mean, the artwork's cool, it's improved over time, and just with the sheer amount of combinations of races that you've got, it makes for a fun game. Don't like it with 4 players though. That's another problem, because for 4 players it's just too much text on the board and it's a bit too complex. But with 3 you get that little bit of interaction, and with 2 players it's nice and quick back and forth. I like it with 2 or 3 players. It's a solid game. I just wish I could convince more people to play it. And don't play with anybody who's AP and takes games too seriously, because this should just be a light beat 'em up game. Don't overthink it. You've got action, minions. What else do you need to learn? Just go for it. And I've even printed out stuff from Board Game Geek that allows me to track the power of the buildings a lot better. And believe me, it speeds things up if you do that, so I do recommend it. But yeah, Smash Up. It's climbed 10 places. Don't think it will climb much higher, but with all the stuff that's coming out, I've got so much variety, I will never play every combination. In fact, I have, actually, there might even be some races I haven't played. No, I've played every single faction in this, but, you know, maybe like once a piece on certain ones. It's just a solid card game. Love it. This franchise will never die, certainly not in the near future. 82, Smash Up. And my number 81, because I can see the camera battery is dying down, so I'll have to make this the last video of the day. But my 81 is the last of the new debuts on this list. I like deduction games, to a point. Sleuth is a little bit like, oh my god, I'm going to be here for a long time trying to think this. But it's a solid game. Deduction mysteries, though, I really like. I love that whole kind of a, you know, Sherlock Holmes style deduction thing of like, here's a mystery, a crime has happened, how are you going to solve it? I've just had Detective from Portal delivered recently as a pre-order review copy, and I've been loving that. I love that game when I tried it out at the UK Games Expo, and I cannot wait to dig into that one. This is the game I was playing before I got into Detective, though, and I've kind of spoiled it with my ramble there, because it's called Sherlock Holmes. Yeah. Specifically, Consulting Detective. This is the Space Cowboys reprint, and I think Space Cowboys feature on this list as well. Yep, 4 games from Space Cowboys on this list. And this is a reprint of an old 1970s game that Starry did, I think, where you read this huge narrative based on a Sherlock Holmes story, an actual mystery story. And from this, you then have different contacts you can go to, different locations, different leads you can follow. They have numbers, a bit like a choose-your-own-adventure style thing. And you read all the details, you get all the information, you have supplementary stuff like newspaper cuttings and things that you can read, and you try and solve the case and get as much information as you can. You're supposed to be going up against Sherlock, but let's face it, he gets a perfect score in this, and to be anywhere close to Sherlock, you've got to be clairvoyant. There's no other way you can do it, so just ignore Sherlock, just have fun playing a heavy deduction game, because it is quite heavy. There's a lot of reading, and it's quite sandboxy. It doesn't hold your hand. You need to really figure out where it is you're going in this. So do not play this if you're looking for an easy deduction game. But if you want a decent challenge, you like the reading, and you like that whole choose-your-own-adventure style thing with plenty of variety, these games are pretty solid. I mean, this is the only one I have, and I've played a few of the cases in here, but there's at least 1 or 2 other ones as well, and I doubt I'll ever get them because it's just a time factor of being able to play them all. But when I want to sit down and just have a really good solo deduction experience, I mean, you can play this with up to Lord knows how many players and it works okay, but as a solo experience, I really enjoy this as a heavy deduction game. So, Sherlock Holmes, Consulting Detective, this is the Thames Murders, which I think is a reprint of the base game. To be honest, pick whichever one's your poison. There's a Jack the Ripper one, and I think there's a new one that came out. They're all pretty solid. Just be good at reading, because it might take you a while otherwise. Sherlock Holmes, Consulting Detective, wrapping up the 2nd episode of my Top 100. Yes, we are down 20 games. We're down to 81. Next up, the 80 to 71. And, well, I'll leave the stats till later, mainly because of the camera battery. But hope you're enjoying the list so far. Hope these games are to your liking. If not, maybe you'll see your favourite game later on the list. And if you don't see it on the list at all, just remember, it may not be on my list. It's a good thing it's on yours, though. They're still only games at the end of the day. Take care, and I'll see you on the next Top 100 episode.